I welcome you all for the program conducted by the Cardiology Department of Madurai Medical College and Government Rajaji Hospital. During the COVID-19 pandemic, in the second wave, we had a very bitter experience and we had a lot of mortalities among the cardiac patients. I am here to discuss with you about the cardiac patients
Recording
who
in
suffered
progress.
during the time of COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the second wave. During that time, we were headed by, to start with Professor Dr. Sangumani, our former dean, and after that, it was led by the present dean, Professor Dr. Ratnavel. And we have many leaders about them. I will tell you when I speak about my slides. Actually, cardiac problems in the COVID-19 can be classified into coronary syndromes and arrhythmias, myocarditis and pericarditis, pulmonary embolism and peripheral embolisms, and some rare problems can occur for the cardiac patients. So among them, we had so many acute coronary syndromes during the COVID pandemic, especially during the second wave. I will share my screen to go to the PowerPoint. Please be patient to listen all the data I am showing. Yes, this is the clinical profile of acute coronary syndrome patients admitted in the COVID ward during the period of April to June 2020. And as I have already told you, we are now headed by Professor Dr. A. Ratnavel, our beloved dean, and our Professor Dr. Dhanalakshmi, Vice Principal, and Professor Dr. J. Raghavan, Medical Superintendent, Professor Dr. Dharmaraj, Deputy Superintendent, and our RMO, Dr. Srilada, and other ARMOs, and other admins. And we are headed by a big team to manage the COVID-19 patients in the medical pandemic. And our Professor and HOD of Medicine, Dr. Nararajan, Professor Dr. K. Sendil, COVID team leader, who is TNGDA president, as you all know, and Dr. Professor Prabhakaran, who is a nodal officer for the COVID-19 from the first wave to second wave throughout, and Professor Dr. Vijaya, anesthetist, who is actually taking part in the COVID team. And I am Dr. Selvarani, cardiology COVID team, and Professor and HOD of cardiology, S.R. Veeramani, Professor and HOD of anesthesia, Dr. Selva Kumar, HODs of various departments, other starting from the anatomy to all the super specialties, and all the assistant professors, postgraduate CRRIs, nursing department, paramedicals and ECG echo technicians. All are involved in this particular work of COVID-19 among the cardiac patients. And this is the acute coronary syndrome patients. As you all see, the total STEMI means ST elevation MI 37 number and unstable angina 20 and NSTEMI 3. So total number of ACS cases are around 60. Among them, we had 4 deaths. Acute coronary syndromes means it is a heart attack, major heart attack, namely STEMI. Others, unstable angina and NSTEMI. They are otherwise called minor heart attacks. And sudden cardiac death patients we don't receive because they die outside the hospital. Among the STEMI patients, ST elevation MI, totally they were 37, and among them 9 were females and 28 were male patients. And you can see the age category. Majority of them come around 60 to 69 years. and you can see the male female data. As usual, male predominate. And among the total 37 patients, some 16 patients had diabetes, 15 had hypertension, and CKD, one patient. And among the 37 STEMI patients, smokers were 15. This is our data. And coming to the RT-PCR status, it was positive in 31 patients and negative in 6 patients. RT-PCR could not be done for 2 patients because they come in very advanced stage. And CT chest finding showed mild involvement in 11 patients, moderate involvement in 17 patients, and severe involvement in 9 patients. In this juncture, I would like to say, even patient with moderate involvement, they had acute coronary syndrome, and sometimes many patients die. We may think severe involvement only can produce death in myocardial infarction patient. It is not so. Majority of them had only moderate involvement. And among the STEMI patients of 37, oxygen status, 11 patients were in the room air, and nasal oxygen through bronchs and face mask was given for 9 patients, and NRM mask for 8 patients, and high flow nasal oxygen was given to 2 patients, NIV CPAP for 4 patients, and mechanical invasive ventilator only for 3 patients. So nasal oxygen was the main majority among the STEMI patients. And coming to the thrombolytic status, usually in the median delay, once the patient gets the chest pain, they will come to the hospital. That is the time called median delay. It was less than 6 hours in 7 patients, and it is between 6 to 12 hours in 15 patients, and more than 12 hours. They come very late after half a day in 3 patients. So majority of them, they reached hospital within 12 hours because of the severe chest pain. And thrombolysis status. Thrombolysis means we will give medicines to lyse the thrombus, because the majority of the COVID-19 patients had coronary artery thrombosis. So the mainstay of treatment is thrombolytic therapy. So our hospital policy is to thrombolyze with either a streptokinase or tenecteplase or alteplase. We had usually streptokinase in our GRH, and because to avoid delay in getting the retiplase and tenecteplase, we started using streptokinase for 25 patients, and we received patients lysed outside to the tune of 8 among the 37 patients, and 4 people could not be lysed because they came very late and they didn't have any angina. So this is the thrombolytic status. The first case at the time of March month, first case I could remember, we have to get permission from the assistant professor who is in charge inside the COVID ward, and the chief of cardiology, HOD of cardiology, who is in charge on the day, and we informed the thing to the dean, medical superintendent, pharmacist, etc., to get the thrombolytic agent for the first time in the March. In the first wave, we did not lyse the patients because of the no standard guideline how to treat a MI patient, because it was a new disease. Out of the experience we gained in various countries, in US or in the Wuhan, every UK, every country gave their own statistics, how they treated the case in their critical care unit. By going through all the literature only, we came to the conclusion that we can lyse the patient with the help of assistant professors and postgraduates and other COVID doctors posted in the ward, especially in the triage and intensive care units. We took the patient for thrombolytic therapy. And other COVID management like remdesivir and anticoagulant therapy and the other interleukin 6 inhibitors, everything we gave. We never denied treatment in such cases, but we took very meticulous care regarding the drug interactions. And this was the standard protocol we followed. All cases were thrombolized with the drugs, streptokinase 1.5 million units, and proxenate heparin 5000 units IV QAD, aspirin 150 milligram OD, clopidogrel 75 milligram OD, and atorvastatin 80 milligram HS. Actually, enalapril was given in those patients who are already on enalapril. We have not started enalapril because the viral entry will enter into the ACE receptors too, and if they are blocked, sometimes the prognosis may worsen. Some of the papers said initially, and after that there was a clear-cut guideline telling that AC and ARB, if the patient are getting, means you can continue like that. We had the guidelines among the use of the AC inhibitor and ARBs in the COVID-19 patients. So we followed that guideline. And in the tachycardiac patients, we avoided beta blockers because it is a compensatory mechanism. So we did not actually do it because we don't want to knock off the compensatory mechanism. If the patient is having more than 120 heart rate like that in the sinus rhythm, we have chosen ivabradine as a drug of choice, 5 milligram BD to start with, and we escalated depending upon the response. So such a hypoxia induced or cardiogenic problems induced tachycardia were managed with ivabradine, not with beta blocker, and calcium channel blockers were judiciously used. And the loading dose policy, everything was same as far as the any other STEMI patients. And total deaths observed were 14. Actually, during the same period, we received less cases in the cardiology department, where we had a mortality rate of around 15.5. So it is the death rate actually is comparable to the COVID ward. We did not have that much difference between the mortality rate of the routine cardiac ICU and the COVID ICU where we treated the cardiac patients. And this is the split up details of the total death of the 14 patients, and 10 were male and 4 were females. And the age split up details: 40 to 49 1, 50 to 59 3, and 60 to 69 4, and 70 to 79 were 3. Again 80 plus were 3. So the majority of death maximum has occurred in the age group where the STEMI is also high. And the comorbidities also: diabetic stands first in 7 cases and hypertension 4 cases. And this is data is comparable with any other countries like US, UK and Wuhan data. They have given they have given some 46 and 36 and 11 like that, comparing the hypertensive, diabetic and coronary artery disease. So like that, in the incidence of death among the COVID patients, the comorbid conditions, actually it actually resembles, it go hand in hand with the other country data. And this is the lung involvement in the death patients. Lung involvement was mild. Mild means less than 20% GGO, and moderate involvement means 20 to 50. Severe involvement means more than 50%. We took that criteria, and the majority of them had more than 50% involvement. In hospital stay was less than 12 hours in 3 patients, and 12 to 24 hours in 1 patient, and 24 to 48 hours in 2 patients. And again, out of 14 patients, 10 had STEMI, 3 had unstable angina, and 1 had NSTEMI. The time of death usually happened, the maximum was between 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. I don't know. the diurnal variation can have some influence in the outcome. And also comparable deaths have occurred in the early morning, 12 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is comparable, and it is similar to the data given in the MI registry in various trials. And the unstable angina patients we received were 20. That is, they will have usually near normal ECG, very minimal baseline changes, STT changes may be there. And 14 were male and the females were 6. And again, the age group is highest among the 52. The 5th to 6th decade had the highest data. And RT-PCR status positive in 16, negative in 4 patients, and CT chest findings were mild in 6 patients and moderate in 10 patients, and severe involvement in 4 patients. Oxygen status again, 1 patient in room air, 15 patient with nasal oxygen, and NIV 3 patients, mechanical invasive ventilator in 1 patient. And among the death patient, it is in the 4th to 5th decade, and 2 were males and 1 female. So this is about the acute coronary syndrome patients. And as you all know, the mechanism how the heart is affected, it is a multifactorial. One side, the cytokine will produce a systemic inflammatory response in the coronary arteries even, and the other side there may be plaque rupture due to stress, and the type 2 myocardial infarction may occur because of the high demand supply mismatch due to hypoxia. And then other mechanisms like the comorbid conditions, already pre-existing coronary problems can lead on to the acute coronary syndrome in the COVID cases. And we will go on to the next presentation, namely arrhythmia and COVID. The arrhythmia can occur because of the direct myocardial injury, or because of the any problems like myopericarditis, or due to some electrolyte abnormalities like hypokalemia, which can occur, or some other drug induced. Say for example, QT prolongation can occur in conditions like use of the macrolide antibiotic. Azithrol is used right and left. Hydroxychloroquine used right and left in the COVID-19 pandemic. So that may be the one of the cause for some of the sudden cardiac death observations. So we will go to the presentation from the beginning. So this is again arrhythmia in the COVID. This is the statistics. Total number of patients were 29, and among them bradyarrhythmias were 6 and tachyarrhythmias were 16. And the outcome, 11 patients expired due to arrhythmia, the fatal arrhythmias, and 11, the 50% mortality we could see in the COVID pandemic when the arrhythmia is concerned as a cause. Predominantly tachyarrhythmia is the atrial fibrillation, and among the bradyarrhythmia predominantly is the sinus bradycardia. As you all know, the drug remdesivir, in some of the studies they showed that it can produce bradyarrhythmia, and the extreme form of hypoxia can lead to bradyarrhythmia at the terminal end. So among the tachyarrhythmias, we can classify into atrial and ventricular. Among the atrial, that is supraventricular, atrial fibrillation occurred with a rapid ventricular response. That means it is for the first time. It is a new atrial fibrillation, and it was around 7 cases. Atrial tachycardia means it may be a focal atrial tachycardia or multifocal atrial tachycardia. Focal means it is an automatic, the rhythm gets in one place, it is triggered, response will be there, and in atria one place will throw impulses in a higher rate, and it will be captured by the ventricles, leading on to 1:1 conduction, or 2:1 conduction, or 3:1 conduction, etc. So this has occurred in 3 patients. And supraventricular tachycardia like AV-RT and AV-NRT occurred in 2 patients, and we will see how we treated those cases. Multifocal arrhythmia, as I have already told you, some atrial focus can occur in various places. That is called multifocal atrial tachycardia. And WP, the Wolf Parkinson White pattern, was seen in one patient. And among the ventricular arrhythmias, some VPCs, bigeminy, trigeminy, we could see in rare some cases. And interestingly, we had one case with septal, otherwise called fascicular VT. Fascicle means the bundle branch, the entire conducting system, from the SCA node to AV node. From the AV node, we have the bundle of his, it will divide into left and right. And again, the left will separate into anterior fascicle and posterior fascicle. So that fascicle has produced tachycardia. We received one such case among the tachyarrhythmia cases. Coming to the bradyarrhythmia, sinus bradycardia was present in 2 cases, and they were due to remdesivir, I suppose. They are not previously on any drugs, or they are not hypothyroid, or they don't have any other cause to produce bradycardia. So we ruled out other causes, and finally we fixed the diagnosis of drug-induced bradycardia. And junctional rhythm we received for one case. Complete heart block, we had 2 cases. And those patients had a very low rate. And among them, one patient was actually 70 plus age. His name is actually Kallan. He had temporary pacemaker inserted inside the COVID ward itself, and one patient had a TPI and he became positive and then transferred to COVID ward. So 2 cases of complete heart block we treated with temporary pacemaker and followed. Second degree AV block was present in one case, and as I have told you, the TPI, temporary pacemaker insertion, was done for 2 cases in the COVID ward. And how we treated the tachyarrhythmia? Cardioverted for 2 cases, supraventricular one and fascicular VT one. Injection adenosine was given for the AV NRT cases, and digoxin injection was given in case with already left ventricular dysfunction. It may be a case of cardiomyopathy, or it may be a case of tachycardiomyopathy. Beta blockers were used in 4 cases, and tablet amiodarone was given in 8 patients. Ivabradine was given for 1 case, digoxin 1 case oral, and for the bradyarrhythmia 2 cases were given the temporary pacemaker insertion, and some actually patients they recovered with a simple RC prenaline oral tablet alone, and 2 cases we had actually some hyperkalemia CKD patients, and we were able to correct the hyperkalemia and they recovered. So this was the management we did, and this is a survival outcome, total number 11, and survived. And among them, the cardiac split up details. Rheumatic heart disease was there, which is a case of post BMB. She presented with atrial fibrillation, and it was actually the controlled ventricular response could be achieved with the use of drugs. CAD, 2 cases, and supraventricular tachycardia was 1 and VT reverted 1. Atrial fibrillation with rapid ventricular response is 4. MAT1 and AT1, WPW. These are the WW pattern. These are all the survival data. And survival outcome coming to the bradycardia, complete heart block 1 with TPA, 2:1 with RC prenaline. Drug-induced cases, once we stopped the drug, patient recovered. Remdesivir and atenolol. And lung involvement was severe in 1 case, moderate in 5, mild in 5 cases. And males were 8 and females were 3. Total number of deaths were 11, and this is the CT involvement. 8 patients had severe lung involvement, 2 had moderate, and 1 was non-COVID. Only the smear was positive. And in the age group, actually we had actually 2 cases death in the 50 to 59, and more than 80 also 2 cases. The rest of them 1. Less than 40, actually 4. Probably they might have had myocarditis or direct cardiac toxicity, out of which they developed tachyarrhythmia and death. And the male patients were 10 and female patients were. So the predominant death occurred in the tachyarrhythmias is arrhythmia cases is in the male. And young deaths were therein 2, and ischemic stroke, mitral valve prolapse MR occurred in 1, rheumatic heart disease with MR occurred in 1. These were the comorbid data: coronary artery disease 2, CKD 1, diabetic 5, systemic hypertension 2, and on ART, one patient that is highly active antiretroviral therapy. One patient had a DVT as a first presentation, and that patient had screened for D-dimer, echo, and CT pulmonary angiogram, and the patient did not have any pulmonary embolism. Sometimes the pulmonary embolism patients can first time can present with the atrial fibrillation as a first presentation. So this is our data regarding the arrhythmias, and so we could actually find out early. Whenever any medical officer see any arrhythmias, immediately they call the duty PG in the department or myself, and we guided them properly to get out of the situation. But even with this sort of efforts, we could not save 50% of the patients. And let us move on to the myocarditis and pericarditis data. Actually, this we suspected because of the persistent tachycardia and persistent failure and persistent shock from which patient could not be revived, and some ECG changes showing tachycardia or PR segment elevation or ST sagging, T wave inversion, or flattening of the P wave, like that. Various type of manifestations we had, and some of the myocarditis patients had VPCs, couplets, triplets, short non-sustained VTs, septal VTs, etc. So I am going to show some of the highlight cases and what we did for them. This is one such patient. You can see the tachycardia, but if you carefully see the AVR, there is elevation, and the T waves were tall, and biphasic type of T waves can be seen, and there is a mild ST elevations you can see in the almost global every lead. Here you can see the ST elevation and the tall T's. So this patient actually did not survive, and even with the standard guideline directed therapy. And this is another patient's ECG. You can see the tachycardia persistently it was there, but that there is no much of PR elevation, but you can see the ST depressions, deviations, and the changes are very global. It is not a territorial one. So this is how we followed up. The first step is we have to identify. The patient will come for chest pain, dyspnea, and then they will have tachycardia or new arrhythmias or any shock like manifestations and heart failure. So immediately we have to order for a ECG and enzymes, and the CRP and ES are the markers, and handheld echo and transthoracic echo that was available only in the later part of the our pandemic. Initially even we could not make up or to get the echo done in the bedside in the April, before April. After that only we could manage to appoint the BOCUS, the point of focus ultrasound echo by the echo technicians. Daily they will do echo for some few cases, and through the video assistants we would able to supervise their reports like that. So I would like to highlight one patient. She had a massive pericardial effusion. For her, immediately we did studies to find out the cardiac tamponade. She had it, and we could be able to do pericardiocentesis in the COVID ward itself. And we drained 750 ml of pericardial fluid, which turned out to be only the transudate. The protein content was only less than 1 gram. It was not a tuberculosis, it is purely a viral pericarditis producing cardiac tamponade. And the simultaneous period during the same time, inside the ward we had 3 cases, and in the cardiac ICU, in the general non-COVID ward, also we had some handful cases. So totally around 10 cases we received pericardial effusions. Out of them, 5 were massive. Out of them, 1 pericardiocentesis was done inside the COVID ward. We could manage by with the help of the ultrasound guided Ziffy approach. So this is how we managed, and we have to differentiate between whether the patient is having ACS or sepsis related cardiomyopathy, or it is a myocarditis, or it is a stress induced cardiomyopathy like Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. We got a wide open eye to segregate which patient is having myocarditis, which patient is having cardiomyopathy, which patient is having ACS, and which patient is having sepsis related inflammatory dilatation of the left ventricle. So all those things we segregated. We could segregate and brand some 10 cases. We could brand it as a myocarditis mixed with myopericarditis. And then this was the further investigation. Transthoracic echo, MRI. Actually, we could not have the access for the MRI. We in the survivors, we were searching for them to go for the cardiac MRI, but we could not get them back for obvious reasons. They are very much scared to come to the even to the non-COVID part of the cardiology workup. And CT coronary angiogram could not be done for patients who suffered pulmonary embolism. I will tell you it later. And contrast enhanced CT. Actually, CT was done for actually finding out the GGO. So they will give sometimes a cardiomegaly, coronary calcification, and pericardial thickening, like that they will give. But we will do echo for such patients, and if we find out dilated LV like that only, we will correlate. We will correlate with the clinical age and other background. We will correlate with the ECG and the bedside CT and the not bedside CT, and then the bedside echocardiography, like that. And then in such patients, this is how we manage. Avoid treatment of sinus tachycardia because it will have negative inotropic effect. Avoid NSAIDs, which it will produce damage. Heart failure and cardiogenic shock was actually managed as usual, but it is an indication for the tocilizumab. We could be able to give for at least 2-3 cases inside the COVID ward. Bradyarrhythmias managed with TPA and RC prenaline. Ventricular tachycardia, DC cardioversion, and other antiarrhythmic drugs like lidocaine, mexiletine, and amiodarone. Some of the supraventricular treated with adenosine and digoxin. QT prolongation can be due to concomitant use of antimalarials, macrolides. As I have already told you, the azithrol and hydroxychloroquine sulfate were used right and left, leading to QT prolongation. Sometimes too much of Lasix can lead to hypokalemia and QT prolongation that can lead to some VT or VF and sudden death. We don't know, and we don't have such data also. It is all theoretical, and this is again we had this as a guide algorithm. We trained all the medical officers to go through the guidelines, and they followed it. And Indian guidelines, they recommend short-term glucocorticoid therapy in the form of methylprednisolone 1 to 2 milligram per kg per day, divided doses, 2 divided doses for patients with the progressive deterioration of the oxygenation, rapid worsening in the imaging and the SIRS features, all those therapies with the convalescent plasma even, and any type of trial therapy which can be combined with a steroid. So even ventilator treatment, shock treatment, everything was given along with the such patients. So in the total handful of 11 patients, majority are below 40 years, Majority had less than 40% involvement, and a majority of them died. One or two only survived. Almost it is a very high risk. If you find out any patient who had myocarditis with a pericardial involvement, with or without pericardial involvement, it is a woman sign. So you have to give both tocilizumab as well as the methylprednisolone or some immunoglobulin therapy in time. And I would like to highlight some of them actually missed cases. That is multi-system inflammatory in children. They came with dilated LV cardiomyopathy. They were offered a treatment of IV immunoglobulin, and they say, the pediatrician who is in charge of the COVID ward, they say it is a actually give the success rate around 50%. So it is very amazing, and it is working out. In the adult, actually, we don't have similar data, and because the age group is around 40 and the lung involvement is around less than 40, we named this sort of patients as 40-40 syndrome, which is a high risk for them, leading to most of the patients' death. And two patients actually we had. We will unscreen. Yes, we had two cases of pulmonary embolism. Out of them, one patient was 37 years old. He had features of the ECG features S1Q3 T3 pattern was there, and he was actually admitted late night, and he was given altiplase. But since his involvement of lung is more than 75%, even with the escalation of oxygen therapy, patients succumb to death. So that is a pulmonary embolism. 37 years old male we lost, and one female who had a submassive pulmonary embolism survived. She had a actually unprovoked pulmonary embolism, and we gave actually only heparin infusion, and they were all followed up with newer oral anticoagulants. And I forgot to tell you that all the patients who had cardiac ailments, the STEMI, unstable angina patients, they were all given actually the newer oral anticoagulants. So rivaroxaban was in our hospital. It was supplied in 15 milligram tablets. We gave 7.5 milligram tablets, the BD dose, and they were being followed up in the cardiology department OP. And we have the actually the review OP for the coronary patients who were admitted in the cardiology ward. And among the acute coronary syndrome patients, one patient who had evolved anterior wall MI, who was actually NGO, he had a private insurance card, and he was shifted to private hospital outside. He had actually LAD, thrombus containing lesion. He was offered percutaneous transluminal angioplasty, and he was stented. LAC was stented with drug-eluting stent, and that patient survived, and we are still following him up in our cardiology OP. So I am here to say a few more stories of cardiac cases in some other day. Thank you very much, all of you, for your patient listening, and I thank our Dean, MS, Deputy MS, Professor Dr. Natarajan, Professor Dr. K. Sendil, our Nodal Officer Prabhakaran, and all the admins, RMOs, ARMOs, and the staffs, postgraduates, everyone who were involved in getting this data, and the analysis of the data by our own cardiac postgraduates. I have to mention their names: Dr. Nandini, Dr. Raja, Dr. Balaji, Dr. Ilamaran, and other postgraduates, Dr. Deepan, Dr. Sabarish, etc. I thank everyone for having given your hands, helping hands to collect all the data. I have collected I have almost all patients' STEMI ECGs in my handset, and I am soon going to transfer it to my collections. I am very happy to clarify your doubts through your comments in the comments box. Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice opportunity. Thank you.